Sealed with an Envelope. Written by Podfic. Read by Arashi. Hubert Vestra was not known for being a people person. In fact, he was more infamous for his lack of social skills. While he was far from being a menace to his neighbors, he did not participate in any of their friendly gatherings for barbecues during the summer or exchanges of casseroles and sweets during the holidays. His office job often worked him long hours, and he did not have the energy to spare on friendly strangers. A small hand wave from his porch was the extent of Hubert's neighborhood engagement. On his days off, Hubert was known to catch up on the heavy sleep debt he racked up from working overtime. He would sleep in late, before waking up and dragging a cup of coffee out to his porch. Reading through a novel, or scrolling through the latest news on his phone, it was a common sight to witness Hubert sipping from his mug on a lawn chair. He often looked a little unkempt with his disheveled hair from his pillows, as well as his bathrobe thrown over his pajamas. It was a drastic contrast in appearance from his fitted suit and tie during the work week. While Hubert never put in any extra effort to impress his neighbors, there was one person whom he tried to be more sociable towards on Saturdays. Only once a week was Hubert home to see Ferdinand, otherwise known as the mailman for his neighborhood. During the week, Hubert left before the sun rose to head into the office, and he arrived back home far too late in the evening to catch a glimpse of Ferdinand. Following his typical route, the mailman usually arrived sometime after 10 a.m. Since there was no delivery on Sundays, it meant that Saturday was the only chance Hubert got to engage in a short, yet sweet conversation with Ferdinand. This morning was no different. Hubert tossed in his bed and stared at the red numbers that were glowing on his alarm clock. He had no real reason to force himself out of bed, but he pushed himself to leave the confines of his mattress to face the day. Yawning, he stumbled over to the bathroom and splashed water on his face to help wake up. He cleaned off his face, brushed his teeth, and then ran a comb through his shaggy hair. He did not bother with using any product in it this morning, but he still tried to combat his hair's usual urge to stick up in 1,000 directions. Slathering on some deodorant under his arms, he switched the light off and headed downstairs. As if running on autopilot, Hubert made his way into the kitchen. He approached his coffee machine and grabbed his filtered pitcher from the fridge to refill the tank on the side. Afterwards, he skimmed through the various coffee grounds that cluttered his pantry. He kept a wide selection, and even bought a new bag every time he went somewhere for a business trip. He simply enjoyed tasting the different varieties of beans that the world had to offer. Settling for coffee grounds from Dagda, he measured out 2 tablespoons and placed it into the filtered cup of the machine. Sliding down a clean mug under the spout, he clicked the top button and waited for his coffee to begin dripping down into his cup. As a pleasant scent began to fill his nostrils, Hubert grabbed his quart of half-and-half creamer from the fridge. He preferred his coffee black, but he had been advised during his last visit to the doctor to cut down on the acid levels in his diet by adding cream. Rubbing at his tired eyes, he debated whether or not he was hungry enough to eat yet. Glancing at the countertop, he tore off a banana and peeled it open slowly. That would be enough to sustain him until lunch. Once the machine dinged to signal it was finished brewing, Hubert poured a tiny splash of cream into his cup and stirred it around with a spoon. He grabbed it by the handle before carrying both the mug and his breakfast out to the porch. Sitting down in a plastic white chair, he set the cup and banana down on a small glass table. The weather was fair. A small spring breeze was blowing in the air, but the sun kept Hubert warm, with its rays beaming down from a clear sky. He was comfortable in his blue and black checkered pajama bottoms and a plain white t-shirt that fit a pinch too tight across the chest. His brown fuzzy slippers on his feet were also quite cozy as he lifted his mug to take his first sip. Staring off in the distance, he heard the sound of chittering birds hidden within the treetops. The soft ringing of wind chimes nearby also echoed in Hubert's ears. He slowly drank from his mug, leaning back in his chair. Pulling out his phone, he began to scroll through the messages he missed through the night. Most of his pings were useless notifications from apps that he barely used, despite the fact he had silenced them. He clicked away at most of the messages, but he did pull up his texts to reply to his oldest friend, Edelgard. She also happened to be his boss, but their relationship was far deeper than cordial. Taking a few bites from his banana, he began to read through some of the news articles that popped up on his feed. It was a shame that most of the reports always sounded abysmal, but occasionally there would be an amusing, happy-go-lucky story. Hubert found himself reading a silly story about a cat that was living at a local library and provided company to those who came alone to work or study. Despite his usual cynical outlook, even he needed something light-hearted to help push away the dark clouds that often drifted across his mind. Likewise, the presence of Ferdinand was a source of joy that Hubert clung on to get through the week. Even if he only got to speak with him for a few minutes on Saturdays, Hubert survived off the bundle of energy the mailman provided him each weekend. After another 5 grueling days at the office, Hubert was more than ready to see that freckled face beaming back at him when he delivered his mail. While he tried to act normal upon his porch and finished off his banana, Hubert had to slow down the speed of his coffee consumption. He didn't want to be inside the house brewing another cup when Ferdinand came around the corner. Fortunately, Ferdinand was right on schedule. He had parked his mail truck down the block and was now carrying his letters around in a brown messenger tote. He had it tightly secured across his shoulder as he walked along the sidewalk, stopping at each house to deliver various advertisements, magazines, and envelopes. As he was fast approaching Hubert's home, the older gentleman on his porch perked up in his chair. Hubert was always fascinated by how flattering the uniform looked on Ferdinand. He had his hair tied up in a ponytail today, and it was hanging out from the back of his postal service ball cap. The familiar mailman insignia pressed on Ferdinand's right breast was without a single wrinkle on his blue short-sleeved blouse. The top 2 buttons were left undone as he walked around, carrying a couple of pens in his shirt pocket. He had on a pair of shorts this morning, due to the sunny weather. Hubert was grateful for the heat, since it allowed him to oogle at the finely sculpted calves that Ferdinand possessed. He couldn't help but watch the muscles flex as the mailman walked up the driveway. Climbing up the stairs, Ferdinand turned to flash his sparkling smile towards Hubert. "Good morning, Mr. Vestra. It is a lovely day, is it not?" "Indeed. It is nice to have this warm weather after such a long winter. It felt like the cold would never leave," Hubert answered, standing up from his chair to speak directly to the mailman. "Yes, I am so happy that spring has finally sprung," Ferdinand chirped with a soft laugh. "I was getting tired of nearly tripping on ice all the time." Hubert nodded towards him. "Do people not put enough salt down?" Ferdinand sighed and adjusted his ball cap with a quick tug. "Sometimes people do not even clear a path at all. I have to trudge through piles of snow on an unshoveled driveway." "How irritating. That is the least people can do to accommodate you when you are the one bringing their packages to their door," Hubert muttered. He did not want to imagine poor Ferdinand falling due to laziness. "Oh, it is not a big deal," Ferdinand trailed off with a faint pink glow across his cheeks. "I always appreciated how you kept your path clear and salted, though." Hubert blinked and felt his stomach flop like an acrobat. Yes, I did try to keep it clear, but it was hard to guarantee if it would still be clean by the time you delivered. I always tried to shovel before I left for the office." "No need to worry. Your hard work paid off. I do not think I ever lost my footing once on this property," Ferdinand said with a chuckle, reaching into his messenger bag. "That's a relief to hear." Hubert exhaled heavily. He knew that Ferdinand had a route to finish, but he wanted to savor a little more of his time. "Do you have any plans now that the weather is warm?" Pulling out a small stack of envelopes, Ferdinand glanced between the mail and Hubert. "Nothing set in stone. I was hoping to spend time at the park. I wanted to take my dog out for a walk around there. Maybe even have lunch at one of the wooden tables." "I have not been to that park in a while. It is well kept, very clean," he said, stalling for more time with small talk. "You should go again soon. There are lots of good trails to walk or run," he suggested, before handing over the envelopes. There was a red one on the bottom of the stack that seemed to stick out. "Thank you, Ferdinand. I will consider it." Hubert knew that this was the end of their exchange, but he wished he could ask him to come inside for a cup of coffee. Just 10 more minutes of his time. "Not a problem. It is my job to make sure your mail arrives safely," Ferdinand said, before stepping off the porch. He paused and waved back to Hubert as he headed down the driveway. "Make sure to check your delivery today. Do not just throw it out. Bye then." Watching as Ferdinand walked further down the road to the next house, Hubert considered his peculiar choice of words. Why had he bothered to warn him not to toss the mail in the garbage? Hubert picked up his banana peel and empty mug. Then he slipped back inside of his house. He locked the door behind him before tossing away the peel. Setting his mug back under the coffee machine, he dumped the old grinds out before scooping a fresh batch into the cup. Then he clicked it back into place before brewing a second cup. As his coffee was dripping back down into the mug, Hubert lifted a stack of envelopes and filed through them. There was an advertisement for a credit card, a bill statement, coupons for fast food, and then finally, a red letter with only his name on it in large cursive letters. There was no stamp or return address to be found. He tossed the other 3 pieces of mail onto the counter and began to rip open the top of the red envelope. Within the envelope was a small white card that was decorated with a beagle holding onto the string of a red heart-shaped balloon in its mouth. It was embossed with glitter lettering that read, "Thinking about you." "Who would send me something like this?" Hubert mumbled to himself. It felt like some sort of practical joke, but he opened the card and read further. On the inside of the card, there were a few more drawings of heart balloons on the left side. A message was handwritten on the right side, and it was done in the same neat cursive writing from the envelope. Hubert's eyes went wide in disbelief as he began to read closely. "Hubert, I know that we are practically strangers, but I cannot get you out of my mind. You have consumed my thoughts. I have never met someone as thoughtful as you. I know that you try to come off as unapproachable, and perhaps you are a tad grumpy some mornings. However, your actions speak louder than your words. You always clear a path for my deliveries. You leave out snacks or water for me during the week. You are always so grateful when I deliver your packages safely. You provide such warm company and conversation during my Saturday route. It is such a shame that we only get to see each other once a week. Perhaps I am assuming too much, but I believe you share some of my feelings. I want to spend more time with you outside of work. I want to be with you as Ferdinand, a gentleman and possible date, not only as your mailman. You are a very handsome man, and I find myself intrigued by your charm. Would you please consider going out with me? Nothing would make me happier. I eagerly await your response. So we do not have to wait a few business days for a returned letter. Here is my phone number. Text me if you wish to plan a date night. Yours truly, Ferdinand. Gawking at the card, Hubert was left speechless. He heard his coffee machine going off behind him, but he might as well have been deaf to the beeping sound. His entire mind was taken up by thoughts of Ferdinand pouring his heart out on this card. He never would have dreamed that the pretty mailman would harbor any fond feelings back for him. Hubert wondered if he had been foolish to never make a move during his time living here, but he supposed it was worth the wait. He would treasure this card and keep it safe. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone and shakily dialed the number on the card. He began drafting a message to Ferdinand, but he kept erasing it and rewriting portions of it. His anxiety caused him to second-guess himself. He didn't want to come off too strong, although that was a silly thought, when Ferdinand had already confessed to wishing to go out together. Sitting down at his kitchen table, he sipped from his fresh cup of coffee and racked his brain for the right words. Eventually, Hubert was satisfied with his response. He read it over at least 5 times to make sure that there were no errors, before hitting the arrow button to send it. He immediately turned off his phone and set it face down on the table. His foot impatiently tapped against the floor, and he swallowed another large gulp of coffee to take off the edge. After a few minutes, he heard the phone vibrate against the wood. Hubert looked over his messages as he felt his heart threaten to leap out of his throat. "This is Hubert Vestra from your mail route. I wanted to take the time to respond back to your message. Thank you for the card. I was not expecting to receive something so well written from you. If it would be amiable to you, I would like to talk about getting dinner together one night this week." "OMG! I am so happy you texted back. Of course, I would love to go out for dinner. Pick a time and place, and I will be there." Leaning back in his chair, Hubert felt a wave of relief crash over him. Ferdinand sounded so eager to go out. He could barely contain his excitement. He had to drop his phone to cover his face in his hands from the rapid blush spreading across his cheeks. Finally, Hubert would have a longer time frame to speak with Ferdinand. He needed to think of the perfect first date spot. Sucking in a deep breath, he sent another text back. "Are you a fan of sushi? There is a spot nearby my office that is quite good." "Yes, I would love to get sushi with you. How does Tuesday at 6 sound?" "Perfect."